Welcome, everybody, to episode 9 of the Firefighters Podcast. With me this week is my friend Tita Cosentino, who is a CISM specialist, and she's going to explain to us what that is. And this week, we're going to discuss my response to the plane crash in Queens, which occurred 20 years ago last Friday. And Tina is just going to walk us through that, and we're going to figure out how to deal with the effects. Welcome, Tina.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate and I'm honored that you invited me to participate. I do critical incident stress management, which is CISM, and our training is covered through a federal grant, and it is funneled through the Massachusetts State Fire Academy. But it's for first responders and military and their families. So it's a peer support program, and I am a family member of military and first responders. My dad was a firefighter. So this training is ongoing, yearly training that goes on multiple times throughout the year. And then every other year we have a biannual conference in Baltimore where teams from all over the world meet, and we do team building and exercises and training together for larger catastrophic events. One of the most important components of CISM is that it is 100% confidential, and not a single one of us gets paid to do so. We are all volunteers. So it doesn't cost us out of pocket for our training, but we do it out of the altruism of our heart because we really care about our firefighter, police officer, and military family.
Right, and that's great. And that's something we like to talk about on the show is volunteerism, especially with firefighters, since I believe more than 2/3 of our nation's firefighters are volunteers. So it's really cool that you volunteer to help. Tina was, I wouldn't say I'm exactly a patient or whatever of Tina's, more of a friend, but however, when I had my last surgery, Tina was nice enough to come and meet with my wife and kind of prepare her, because I was preparing for the worst, right? In case I couldn't walk again, or, there's a lot of risks with spinal surgeries. So before we get into the plane crash, can we get into that a little bit? Like I know it's personal what you and Kristen talk about, but it seemed to really help her. What is it exactly that you do with this, like, to prepare the spouses for something like that?
Well, in any capacity, when anyone is going through a critical incident or facing a critical incident, the most important thing that we can do is support their natural support network. I am no one special. I'm one of many trained people who also do the same thing. And we're fortunate to be able to come in and support, but our job is to make ourselves not needed. It's nice to be wanted, but not needed. And your best support are the people that you identify that are closest to you. So most often that is your family network, your immediate friends, and potentially some coworkers. It's how you find your support circle.
Right.
I got paired with Kristen through your request, and I worked with other SDNY family members, some who lost on 9/11, some who are suffering from the medical ramifications, and some who have now since passed from those medical ramifications. And it was nice to meet your family. It's nice to see the family unit, so that's helpful. And it gives a layer of depth for the spousal support or support of parents or older children, that more than just what the first responder is doing on their job. You know that the job isn't just them. They have family members. They have other obligations. They have other desires and love. Hockey for one of them, and to find ways to bond with that in the family unit is very supportive.
Right. Can you lean up a little bit? Wait, I'm losing you a little bit. There you go.
Sorry. Is that
That's
better?
right. Yep, better.
Is it the voice that you're losing?
I just want everybody to hear what you're saying. That's all.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I'll talk louder.
I know
I'm
that's
soft spoken, but I do talk a lot. The other component, I don't know if I mentioned this, is the confidentiality. It's our training and support services have been upheld in law, in the court of law. Nothing that is shared with us from a family level or from a first responder or military personnel can be divulged even under court order. And we are bound to that confidentiality. I'm grateful that you and Kristen earlier have said that it's okay to speak about that. But if someone were to contact me or another CISM person, no one would ever even know unless they decided they wanted someone else to know. And more often than not, that's how our support takes place, is one person refers us to another person.
Okay, that was gonna be my next question. Do you ever get like, do the agencies themselves call you up to intervene? Yeah.
That's the primary method, is that there's a critical incident in a firehouse and they'll call out for support. And we go in, usually within 90 minutes, they'll respond. And it basically is a debriefing for people that understand that component. It's a debriefing where you walk through who did what during the incident to try and fill in the gaps that might be missing for individuals. For example, if you did something on a job and you don't understand how and why the other component wasn't done, it doesn't mean that it wasn't done. You're just not aware of it.
Right.
So filling in the gaps for each other is a huge help. And that can go from our dispatch right through to the actual guys on the job. And then even to family members afterwards. It depends on the incident.
Okay, cool. And that's actually why I wanted to have you on, is to help me fill in some gaps. I've spoken about it a little bit on the show, but I haven't really delved into what I saw that day. Everyone knows about 9/11. There's documentaries all year long now, but I feel like that incident kind of gets lost in our history simply because of the timing, right? Had that happened at any other time, that would have been, a huge tragedy in New York. Now it just seems like a footnote to 9/11, really, which
still a huge tragedy.
Right. I don't know if people are aware, but it was a fully loaded jet airliner filled with fuel that essentially went straight down nose first into somebody's house in Bell Harbor, Queens. So I'll get into it from my point of view, and then you can help me from there, because that day changed me forever, more so than 9/11 did. I think just because of the sheer volume of death and destruction that I witnessed. At Ground Zero, I saw dead bodies and body parts. And for anybody listening, it's going to get graphic. So if you don't like to hear about blood and guts, maybe put on some music. So yeah, that day I remember we didn't get called right away. We were watching it on TV with everybody else. We didn't know what was going on. We thought maybe it was another attack, which I still can't say for sure if it wasn't. They had a report, but who knows? I can't really hear you.
I didn't say anything.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if your mic cut out.
I'm sorry.
All right. No. I didn't know if your mic cut out again. So we went later in the day, and I remember I was a probie, and I was freaking out like everybody else. And I remember getting chewed out because my girlfriend at the time was in England. She was living there, and she called me from a payphone. And I couldn't really hang up, but she was flipping out. And, somebody asked me to do something, and I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? I can't really hang up the phone right now when your girlfriend's flipping out, thinking that you're going to respond to a terrorist attack. And, so whatever. So once I went and explained to the lieutenant why I couldn't hang up the phone, he understood, but he chewed me out in front of everybody. But eventually we got sent there probably at like 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. And for me, I was supposed to be off duty. By the time we left, I believe the guy who was supposed to come in forgot that he had a scheduled overtime tour, which happens, so I had to wait for him. So essentially we had to go before he got there. So that was my first, that's really my first memory of it. And second was I was supposed to meet my dad for dinner that night. For you New Yorkers, we were supposed to meet at Lee's Tavern, which for my money is the best pizza in Staten Island and probably New York. But I had to call him on the way there and say, I can't come. I'm going to this event. I don't know what's going to happen. I know I'm getting home. And that was it. And it was, we hadn't really spoken for a while, me and my dad. So it was kind of like our first time we were supposed to, go hang out. So I didn't make it to dinner. And I apologize for speaking so much in this interview, but this is the point. My first memory of getting to the scene was the house next door. There was a head of a golden retriever with one paw still attached. And as soon as I saw that, I realized that, this isn't going to be good. It was probably like 100 feet from the crash site, and I love dogs, so that was pretty striking. And then when we got there, it was a bit chaotic, but I think 9/11 eerily prepared all the guys for what was going on, because everyone just kind of did what they had to do without really thinking about it, because we had just been doing it for 2 months. But we got there right when they started pulling the bodies out. And it's not so simple as just picking up a dead body and moving it, because the bodies were intertwined with each other, with the parts of the plane, all the wiring, pieces of the house. They weren't coming out clean by any means. And, we had to do some things that nobody would ever want to do to another person just to get them free, just to get them loose. And I remember one striking moment for me was some chief yelling at me, "Hey kid." And I looked up, I was like, "What?" He goes, "Watch where you're standing." And I looked down and somebody's intestines were wrapped around my foot. And I was like, it was pretty startling to realize you were standing in somebody, because you couldn't tell what you were standing on. It was just kind of like a soup. And then I remember there was a young priest there, and he made eye contact with me, because I was 22. I must have looked like, a kid in his father's fire gear, right? I just remember he just gave me this reassuring, nod, but he didn't say anything. We stayed there for hours, digging and pulling and cutting, and it was just a lot of death at one moment. And the smell, by that time, I guess it was like 8 hours later, it already smelled like death. I remember sending out my gear to get cleaned by the fire department, and I had to send it out about 3 or 4 times to get the smell of dead bodies out of my gear. And it was strange, and then I remember the ride back, and one of the guys sitting across from me, I won't say his name, but he was working on 9/11, and I don't know if you know the story of Engine 216, but Danny Sir, who was the first official fireman to die on 9/11, was hit by a jumper. And this guy was standing next to him when it happened. And I could just see the look on his face, and he was just shaking his head saying, I didn't need this. He didn't need that on top of everything he had already witnessed. So that, like I said, though, for me, something inside of me just, I wouldn't say died, but I lost a piece of, I don't know, of who I was. I remember my dad telling me that he would come home from work, because at that time I lived with him. and I would just be sitting staring out the window, which isn't me. I was a 22-year-old kid, I would spend my days off staring out the window at concrete in Staten Island, So, I never really dealt with it. I've never really told detailed stories of what I saw there, even to my family. I certainly never told my kids this, and I'm hoping that someday when they're old enough, they could watch this and find out why daddy stares out the window. But so yeah, I don't know what I lost that day, but it was something. And I'm sure you've witnessed other people go through or say similar things, but I'll let you talk now. And then
Actually, thank you for sharing that. It really was a pretty dramatic synopsis. You shared a lot of detail, and everybody processes things differently. There is no right or wrong way that we go about experiencing things. They happen, and we react. And how we react matters. You mentioned a couple different things beforehand about your experience at 9/11, which you felt prepared, you and the other guys. It was a continuation of what the trauma you were already going through. So that compounded, extended trauma. And that you and your dad hadn't connected at that particular point in time you were supposed to. The piece, a piece that I hear you expressing that potentially was lost, a part of you. Maybe it wasn't a part of you rather than the loss of the innocence of a 22-year-old's life. You knew going into the fire department that you were going to be doing challenging things and you were prepared for that. But to have so much happen at such a young point in your career is profound. And your ability to share that is enormous. Anything that gets emotion out of the body is helpful. So it's processing. You're talking, and that gets something out. You're taking your processing a bit further by making these podcasts. And I've seen you in other venues. You've known each other for several years, and that you are trying to share so that it helps others in their healing process. And that is one of the stronger points of healing, is when you can bring in your story to share with others, and that's exactly what you're doing. I also heard you saying that you wanted to protect your girlfriend, who's on the other side of the ocean at the beginning, and the rationale for being torn between being a boyfriend, regular civilian boyfriend, and being a firefighter. And really, you're one person that has multiple facets. You're also a son that couldn't be his dad that day. Going to the scene, the pieces that you just shared, I'm sure come up for you at different times and unexpectedly. And that is difficult when those come out of the blue, and how you process those, what you do with those matters. Unfortunately, bad things happen to good people. Bad things happen to bad people too. Mm-hmm. How we move forward with those experiences defines who we are. And every single human being on the face of the earth needs support and help. No one doesn't. We're not isolated creatures. We're meant to be together. How do you think you experience the immediate aftermath of, like, the first time you saw your dad?
I guess when I eventually got home, I don't know, maybe the next day, because I probably got home at like 2 or 3 in the morning. So yeah, I don't remember, seeing him after that, so I can't say for sure. We didn't go for pizza.
feel that you've connected with your dad since then?
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Right. You
Been
know,
able to move the relationship forward, given what you've gone through.
yeah, maybe, plus I had been away for, I don't know, 7 years. I went away to high school and then college, and my mom died in the middle there. And so it was really a readjustment to moving back home, which, it had been a while. And adding in that, the first 2 months of my career, I think it was a lot for all of us, right? I mean,
It happened to
yeah,
the whole family,
right.
not
Oh, sure, yeah, because all of us were there. Both my brothers and my father were all at, either at Ground Zero or Lower Manhattan. So we all experienced it in our own way. Um,
did they all respond in Bell Harbor too?
no, that was just me. Um, it's funny. I don't really know many people who did. I guess because I worked on the other side of the city, so most of the companies were from Queens and I guess maybe the Bronx. Not really quite sure how we ended up there from Williamsburg, but I don't
Need
know.
your help.
Right, I guess.
Fun.
Yep. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think many of the other guys who were there ever really talk about it. I remember last year on Twitter around the anniversary, I posted something, and then I don't even know his real name. He just uses a Twitter handle. Sent me a few messages saying that a couple guys he knows were there, and the things they describe are way worse than he remembers from 9/11. And I don't think they talk about it enough. Either with each other or I highly doubt anybody talks about this with their families.
Why do you think that you don't talk to your family about it? Like, why do you not talk to your family about it?
Well, I made that decision. I mean, even as a kid, when I decided to be a fireman, I made that decision. Like you mentioned, the girlfriend I had on the phone, like that I was going to do this so other people didn't have to do it. Right. I was going to go see this bad shit so other people didn't have to see it. Because that's that's what firemen do. Right. So to a certain extent, like you have to be able to take that kind of stuff and absorb it and still function. That's part of the job too, is being able to push that stuff to the side to a certain extent. Otherwise, it'd be impossible to ever get back on the rig if you weren't able to do that, right? But I think sometimes you take that too far, and if you keep pushing enough stuff to the side, then
it gets buried and it comes back later. The
right.
body always keeps the score. Nothing happens to us that does not impact our body. You mentioned smell, sound, even a taste in the air. We experience, we have multiple senses. And so how we integrate those senses into our being going forward impacts us in how we grow and evolve as human beings. Most often, families, first responders, military, they don't share with their family because they need a safe space. And your family is who you love the most.
Right.
And you want to keep them pure and protected. They're who you're doing this for.
Right.
And you want that safety. And sometimes in the family support component, just to have somebody else explain, why is my husband not talking to me? Because he really can't, because you're his safe space for him to come home and just be. But I think that culturally, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. Culturally, first responders, military, have that suck it up attitude that you mentioned. Absorb it and move on. And in some regards, you have to in order to function on the job. But the ability to sit down and talk about that at the kitchen table, where a lot of firehouse kitchens, where a lot of stuff takes place. certainly was very helpful for my father and for our family as we were growing up through different incidents that occurred at times. So I know that firsthand. And the ability now, I think it's much more prevalent in our culture. We're learning and opening up that getting support matters. And it's not a sign of weakness. Technically, it's a sign of strength. And sometimes people just need to talk and have someone genuinely listen who understands the premise under which you're sharing. Because I've certainly not gone through what you've gone through, but I can hear the words that you're saying and I'm listening to them. And to be able to get that emotion out of your body is part of the processing that human beings go through. Some people talk, some people yell, some people run. Physical activity, anything that gets your heart beating for more than 20 minutes is a good way to process trauma, to process grief. Is to do that every day, 20 minutes a day is healthy for all people, but particularly after a traumatic event, really within 24 hours is ideal to get your heart rate up outside of the actual event. Certainly your heart's beating at the event.
Right.
Is another way. So dancing, boxing, writing, ice skating, playing hockey, anything that moves your body or gets the emotion out. Some people write music, some people sing. There are multiple venues in which to get emotion out. But doing so is helpful. And you can do that on your own, but more often than not, it's having a compassionate presence.
Yeah.
There to listen and experience your sharing is what matters.
Yeah, I say that to Kristen all the time, that if I could just play a hockey game once a week, that I would feel a million times better, just to have that release and hang out with the guys, and actually play.
I know that's a big part of who you are.
Yeah.
And getting to know those facets is part of the family support component. Because if I didn't know you at all, and this was the first time we were meeting, which can happen in a CISM setting, I might meet someone only once. I know nothing else about them. I know what they're experiencing at that moment, and we go through our process of sharing, and we make a follow-up time to touch base. However, they care to do that by phone, in person again, particularly in person helps, but obviously you and I are doing Zoom, and that helps too. It's better than nothing.
Right.
And then sometimes that's all they need. Or then, 3 months down the road, 6 months, it's just a follow-up. Hey, hi, how's it going? And sometimes that's all you need for certain incidents. And if you take those steps in sharing along the way, then it doesn't build up and compile. I recognize that you have a unique situation of extreme trauma on top of extreme trauma in the beginning of a career, in addition to losing your mom. But the ability to share pieces as they're happening allows our brain to move stuff from the forefront of our processing and actually file it away. And so it gets filed away, not in a sealed up tight little box that nobody opens and doesn't talk about. It's actually moved into long-term memory. So then it doesn't impede our ability to function and move forward. Its functionality is how you do an assessment. And some people need counseling, and some people need further guidance. And we don't do counseling. We don't do therapy. We do critical incident stress management. So to be able to talk about something when someone needs it and is ready to do so is important. But if they need more than that, we have multiple services that we refer to. We have residential services. We have hour-long services. There's components that people want to do.
Right. And there is a distinct difference, right, between the initial trauma, like that type of counseling, as opposed to long-term therapy. Like it's two totally different things, right? Two different.
Yeah.
So, but something you touched on before, I'm 100% agree with is the physical release of the emotions. I think for me, that's when everything came to a head, which is probably right around when we first met, was when I was physically unable to do anything. That's when all the stuff that I had been pushing off to the side and stuffing in my locker started making their way out, because I couldn't move. I couldn't get up and go do all the things, ride my bike, or whatever it was that I did to keep my mind off of it. All I could do was sit and drink, you know,
That's putting in. That's going into your
right,
life.
which only
that doesn't help.
right. And I think that accelerated my physical ailments also. I think that's, I think there's a huge connection between emotional health and your physical health. And I think, I know you see it, and I think that's why we see the acceleration of cancers and all these other illnesses in firefighters, because they do have all that trauma built up. And I think the emotional trauma only further. I know they've done studies on this. They do it at Mount Sinai with 9/11, and I know. I felt it myself. Like, I know there's got to be something to it, right?
And well, the emotional component to the body through all of our senses, in addition to your chemical exposure and physical trauma combined, can be, the body keeps the score. It really does. And you can't take away your exposure, your chemical exposure, your physical trauma on you has happened. But how you emotionally deal with that can impact your longer term health. Absolutely.
Right. That's an interesting element. No pun intended. That I didn't think of was the the chemical trauma, that we all faced, not just at 9/11, but at that plane crash, as you and I have discussed.
Well, both of them, yeah.
I would say so. We were standing in jet fuel. It's 9/11. It was one of many toxins in the air. I think 160 or whatever, but it was blown all over the lower Manhattan. This was all in one plot of land. Those aren't very big plots of land to begin with. So I think that's an interesting element. And I wonder how much that adds to or changes our brain's functionality, right? Because you're adding different chemicals to your body, essentially.
Absolutely. It definitely has an impact.
Right.
And then the mindset, because like you said, you had to respond. You had to go to the job. You had to be there, standing in the fuel and all of the other chemicals that came out of the plane. It wasn't just fuel.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were dealing with the trauma of the patients that you were moving, and the bodies that you're moving is additional exposure. And you even mentioned it took you 4 times to send out your gear before it was clean. Mm-hmm. And now we also know that the components in the gear are difficult. So that's exposure. That's not how you're dealing with the exposure.
Right.
You can't change the exposure. Well, we're hoping we're going to change the components in the gear, but right now you can't control that. But how you emotionally process and share about that, even just the ability right now, I saw it in your face to actually acknowledge that, wow, hey, that matters. To be able to share that, hey, I've had this exposure as well.
Right.
The chemical exposure. And have somebody else listen and acknowledge that you went through a terrible thing. That was hard. Mm-hmm. It was hard for a human being to do that. Remarkable as a firefighter to have done that stuff. And we're grateful. Definitely.
Well, thank you. But interestingly enough, I don't know if you know this, but you're the first person who noticed my shaking. Um, it was something that I had felt, but I didn't think anybody else could see it. I don't know why. Like, you're physically shaking. I remember we were at Ray's funeral, and you came over, and you I don't know, my hand something was shaking, and you started mentioning things like Parkinson's and like other things that I hadn't even thought of yet. And I don't know, I just thought it was perceptive of you to.
Well, it's also from experience. And my
Right.
father died of Parkinson's.
Right.
And he had exposure, fire exposure, that a lot of the guys that were on that particular job are now being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And it was a component that I know personally. So to see it in others, it's sad, but it's also an acknowledgement of the family or fire family, right?
Right. Yeah.
And caring for one another. And
I think that's something we're going to see more of, unfortunately, is those types of illnesses are going to start coming out, I think. I haven't been diagnosed with Parkinson's, if you're listening.
It's just a neurological component.
Yeah.
Something I knew.
Right.
Why
yeah, I just have like a bunch of things all happening at the same time. So they can't really attribute it to any particular thing because of the neck injuries and whatever. We don't have to get into that, but I just don't want people to think that I have Parkinson's.
Right.
But there are a lot of guys out there who do. ALS also, we're starting to see more of in the 9/11 community, which I think is related to the chemicals that you were mentioning, which is also why I think it's important that people talk about this stuff. Like you said, get it out of your body because it's all in there. And if talking about it a little bit puts off those illnesses or stops or slows them down, then why not, right? I mean,
or just helps to put your mind, your being in a different frame to deal with what's going on in your body from exposure.
Right.
You know, you mentioned in your sharing of making eye contact with the young priest that was at the scene. And potentially that eye contact did more for you than you might know, you know, and it's nice for you that it came from a priest, from a faith point of view, but it could have been any other human being, you know, even the chief that looked at you and gave a point, look where you're standing, you know, be careful where you're standing.
Right.
And to have another eye contact, it's human contact that we need. And when military and first responders try to separate that, oh, I'm a firefighter and I'm a dad and I'm a husband and I'm a son. No, you're all of those things together. And how do we support all of that together?
Right. That's actually something I mentioned last week. That's the difference between, you know, service members and firefighters is the time isn't separated. It's you can go from sorting dead bodies to putting your baby to sleep in 45 minutes. You know, you're not off at war. I think, I mean, it's two totally separate things. I mean, you know, I'm not saying.
First responders have a lot more immediacy with their natural life.
Right.
There are components of the military that do have that as well. I've worked with drone pilots.
Right. Yeah.
Who have gone from they're in a bunker here and they're dropping bombs over there.
Sure.
And watching it, and then they're home for dinner, and there's zero processing for them.
Yeah.
Which is the same that you guys go through, except their bodies aren't there. But they have eyes, they have ears, they know what's happening, so their exposure still matters. Right. You additionally have physical exposure.
Yeah, I didn't think about it. I guess certain extent fighter pilots also like that. That's how it started. They used to do stuff like that. I don't know if they still do,
Right, but they were separated.
Right,
They were on deployment. Where now with our technology, the technology is advanced. So, yay, we don't put a person in danger, but they're still having trauma. It still affects them, right?
Yeah.
And to say that, oh, now there's no risk, that's false. There is still risk.
Absolutely, right. I also talk about this a lot, was Ray's attitude in dealing with his exposure to all the trauma and the emotional trauma and his own illnesses. He always talks about having cancer, right? Anybody who talk, how you doing? I got cancer, you laugh in your face. But I think that's why he lasted so long, right? I mean, I'm no professional, but the smiling and the talking about it and the wisecracks, I think, are what kept him going, and I think
he also was helping others to acknowledge that, yes, I am sick. Yes, I may have cancer. Yes, I should go get that looked at. So he was also serving a mission.
Yeah.
At the time. Yeah, I knew Ray for quite a few years before meeting you, but that Ray is actually, Ray is the one that invited me to go to putting the names on the wall when you guys did that with the Fieldwood Foundation, putting the names on the wall where you and I met. But it was through Ray that I was invited to be there.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people say that we met through Ray. Like, that's.
Well, one of his good lines was, "I got a guy."
Yeah, right.
But I'm a girl.
Doesn't matter.
Right.
You're still his guy when it comes to CISM. That's great. Yeah, I think that is more so his legacy than anything, was his ability to keep helping people, even though he was the one who really needed the help, which I think helped him. I don't know, that sounds like a bad haiku, but
no, that's true. There's have you heard of the Spartan Pledge with the Firefighter Act? The
No.
Spartan Sword. So just on Veterans Day, I was with the cadets from the FDNY, from the Fire Academy, who were all military, who came up, and they took the pledge right with the Engine 343, and it's the sword. The Spartan sword was made with the remnants of the World Trade Center steel site after all the components were out, and they swept it all up, and there's the little fragments and the little bits of dust, and they sent it out, and it was hand forged into a Spartan sword. And there's a pledge that you take about not taking your own life, and to have you check in with your battle buddy, and to have a mission, find a mission to help your warfighter family. And it was initiated. I took the inaugural pledge down in Washington, D.C. when it was first rolled out. And it was for military, active duty, and veterans. And now they've since made a Spartan Act, which is for the fire department. And they bring that because you wear two different uniforms, but you do the same thing. You're our front line in protecting people. Mm-hmm. And that the component in that pledge of, to have a mission. Your mission is to find a mission to help people. And that Ray was excellent at doing that. And now, Rob, you're doing it with your podcast. You have a mission. You're doing it. And those that listen, I've listened to all of your podcasts, and you bring in stories and components that people are able to listen to, that they may not have had exposure to any other way. And that may be helping them, or it's helping them to talk to other people, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I hope so. And I don't know exactly. I mean, my main reason for wanting to do this is so that my kids will have something to look back on and get me to hear these stories from my mouth, because I don't know if I could ever say some of these things to their faces. I don't, you know,
Of course not. Of course you
but I do hope that it at least, you know, kind of humanizes, you know, what it is that we go through. And that's why I love having the guys on to tell their stories, because, you know, you might see a car accident and be pissed off because you're stuck in traffic and you got to wait for the tow truck or whatever. But then you hear Joe McKay talking about pulling a 2.5-year-old boy from underneath a car, and you realize, you know, that
Yep.
somebody's life has really changed. You're not just late for work, you know.
I always say when things like that happen, I say that apparently my guardian angel knows more than I do, and I'm not supposed to be moving right now. So this traffic jam is to help keep me safe.
Right. So maybe just put on some music and
Right.
not be so pissed off. Right. Or maybe put on a podcast about firefighting and listen to
There
that. All right.
Also choose a component with family support, with being able to just text Kristen and check in, just checking in, saying hi. And sometimes she's just like, yeah, hey, we're doing all right. And that's good. And then other times out of the blue, it's, do you have a second? And I always have a second, always. You know, one of the big components that we have too is knowing how many people we're actually interacting with. And you can interact, and that's fine, but for a longer term component, you can't have 100 people you're taking care of. That's impossible.
Right.
But if someone texts me, and I know I've told this to you, and I know I've told it to Kristen, you text me, I'll respond within 90 minutes. But if you call me 24/7, I'm answering that phone. So there's that extra level of safety of,
right.
I don't even need to call, but I know that there's someone that will listen to me at any time.
Well, I think I said that to you last week. You were asking me how I was doing, and I was answering you honestly. And because I knew that you were genuinely asking, you wanted the real answers. And I think I don't know if we lost our empathy, but I think that's a big issue. And I think I told you this, like I started an experiment. When people asked me how I was doing, I started giving them the honest answer. And 99% of the time they instantly changed the subject, or, you know, it was clear it was just a rhetorical, how you doing? Nobody really wants to hear it. So anyway, but I always know when you're asking, which is why you usually get a long answer, because nobody else really cares. So
no, that's not true.
You know what I mean?
They may not be able to cope with the answer.
Right.
You know? They don't have training. I have training in how to listen.
Right.
You know, and that matters. I've also had personal exposure to different things and experiences in first responder communities, and that matters. You know, our experience helps us to build us moving forward. And so they ask and then don't really want to know.
Right.
You know, but then others are able to ask a pointed question, and you know, yeah, I can answer this one because this is a trusted person that I can share with and know what I'm saying is going to be respected, listened to. And if I had a magic wand, you know I'd pull it.
Right. But I think even untrained people can, I mean, empathy doesn't mean you actually have to have experienced the same exact thing to know that.
No, absolutely not. Right. I've not experienced any of what you've experienced, thank God. But I have empathy to listen.
Right. And you've dealt with, you know, I know some of your story, you've dealt with a lot yourself, and that you draw on that to support other people. Right. I definitely think we need more of that, just from everybody, not just
the human race needs more of it.
Right. Like,
well, you know, I think culturally, in our area, we put on the bravado. And I think that is now shifting. And we're certainly making huge strides with that at a level in DC with the VA in getting support for our military. And we're doing that with groups like ours, with like the ISM, with our local fire departments, our local police departments. It doesn't have to be a 9/11 issue or a plane crash in Bell Harbor to need support. I mean, it could be
No.
just like the one car accident, that he was sharing the other day.
Yep.
And that, that is sad. And that's a rough situation. That's a critical incident, And sometimes you go through things and it doesn't bother you. And that's what bothers you.
Yes.
I just did that and I'm okay. Well, I'm going to go get a ham sandwich. Like, I'm all right. And then you stop and say, I can't believe that I just went through that and I feel nothing. I'm not feeling anything.
That's funny you mentioned that, because a few weeks after the plane crash, we had a run, and it was me and the lieutenant. A few of us were the same people who were working, and it was a guy jumped off the roof completely naked and smashed his head off of an old radiator it was a mess, and it didn't even faze us. We were just like, oh, all right, clean up in aisle 6 or whatever. We made some jokes, and then later on, I'm like, that should have probably affected me a little bit more than it did, but it was just like we grew numb to it,
One more.
Right. It was just.
But you did utilize a great technique, which is humor, and
Yeah.
in our world here, we have a pretty thick sense of humor.
Yeah.
But you did use a method of coping, which was humor, and that you got it out of, you talked it out. You mentioned it,
Yeah.
You might not even see that you did it, but you did it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think there's lack of humor in a firehouse. I don't think that is. That's definitely not our problem.
Yeah. Sarcasm. Yeah. All the way.
Right. But something you said earlier, and I think something that helped me was that priest, was the people who weren't firemen. I think especially in the moment, it's hard for us to really help each other, go through that. And I probably should have mentioned this, but right before the priest looked at me, I had handled a baby's head, just the head. And it was like, all I could do to just keep moving, not, I don't know what I would have done, walk away, and just having that reassuring moment with that priest helped me. And then another thing I should mention is when we walked back to the rig, every single house had tables set up in front. They were giving us food, offering us drinks. I was on probation. Anything, hugs, thank yous. And I think that helped a lot, and I think that's part of the empathy that I'm talking about. And if it wasn't for that, and same thing at Ground Zero, the lines of people cheering and applauding, and that stuff goes a long way. It shows that you're not doing it, for nothing, or at least, that those are the people that I was saying, you're doing it so they don't have to. And at least when they show you that support, or when they text you how you're feeling, and they really want to read the response, I think that's very helpful.
Yeah, it does. It takes a village. That's a cliche little comment, but it does take a village to live. We're not isolated. We're not individual entities. That we're meant to be in community. Human beings are meant to be in a community.
Right, and I think we all do. Another cliche, but we all do better when we all do better, right? If we all, if we just, I don't know, it's a tough. I feel like it's getting harder and harder, or people are caring less and less about each other. I don't know if it's the internet and the disconnect from humanity, like
the physical component of people,
of actually being in the same room as people. Right. I think that you lose. It becomes like a video game. Like you stop caring because it's not really real. I feel like, I don't know.
No, there are a lot of studies going on about that too.
I'm sure.
we need touch. Human beings need touch. And, just the putting a hand on the shoulder of somebody,
Right.
a pat on the back, or, holding someone's face when you're really looking at them.
Hmm.
And those things matter because it's another component of showing that empathy.
Right.
You know?
Or in today's world, it's just putting your phone away or out of your sight. I say that all the time. If you're sitting there with your phone, like, here's my phone. If it's sitting in front of me while we're having a conversation, it's part of the conversation, right? It's part of your mind isn't completely committed to the person you're talking to. That's why if I'm talking to someone, I try to put my phone away so they see that I'm listening to them.
It's a level of respect for the person that you're interacting.
Right. Plus, if someone like me who has trouble focusing as it is, I don't need any other distractions anyway. So, but so if you're listening and you're talking to somebody, put your phone out of the line of sight, at least. I think that helps. That's the same to me as touching somebody on the shoulder is at least giving them your time.
Yep, undivided.
Right. So, well, thank you for giving me your time. You've been a big help. And I have to tell you, my kids still talk about going to your Vermont house. So thank you. That was a big help at the time too. It really helped us pull our shit together and at least give our kids a little bit of fun
Right.
in that horrible summer.
So for others that don't know what you're referring to, we have a cabin in Vermont that we use for respite for our first responder or military families. And many have had the opportunity to go up there. And you're right, when you're dealing with something overwhelming, the last thing that is on your list of things to do is let's plan a family getaway.
Yeah.
So just have a place to go that doesn't cost a dime, and you can do nothing, or you can make it into an adventure however you need or want. And I know that your crew did do that in different ways. And just to give them another place to be is very helpful. And I've had a lot of positive feedback from those that have had the opportunity to go up north in Vermont.